Hello. Last week I talked about the fact that for all kinds of reasons money was very tight, and several of you did in fact send me beer money, and I just want to say thank you very, very much from the bottom of my heart. I do really, really appreciate that. Thank you for the beer money. It came in handy, allowing me to do this. Cheers. Welcome back everybody to me doing weekly Navel-Gazing, the video where I talk about all the things I did last week and all the books I read last week, and then talk about what I plan to do this week, and then it all kind of goes into these weird places where I randomly ask questions that some of you maybe answer in the comments, and it all devolves into rambling, as all my videos inevitably do. And first of all, welcome. Since yesterday, I gained 10 new subscribers. I hope you'll stay. I hope you like it here. Thank you very much. And let's start by talking about books I read last week, which should go fast. I did read books, not many though. I did in fact finish my collection In the Land of Time, which is a collection of Lord Dunsany stories edited by S.T. Joshi. I finished that one, and yeah, you know, it's Lord Dunsany. It's really cool. You can never read too much Dunsany, I would argue, so that was fun. And then I did, in fact, read With the Old Breed, a World War II Pacific theater memoir by E.B. Sledge, and that's something I read. It's, well, it's a World War II memoir. It's lots of entrails and palm trees, which, yeah, kind of expected. And then I did, of course, start reading Gotham, a History of New York City to 1898 by Edwin Burroughs and Mike Wallace, I think. It's a massive history of, well, the first couple of centuries of New York's existence. The audiobook is like 67 hours long, which is longer than the audiobook for Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson, so now you know how much of a monstrosity this is. There's a second part called Greater Gotham that I also plan to read afterwards, which covers the next couple of decades of New York City history, and yeah, I guess I'll learn stuff about New York City in that one. That is what I am currently reading. Yes, it was a very slow reading week. I did all kinds of stuff, and most of that involved, you know, listening to punk rock at the gym instead of listening to an audiobook. And turns out that makes me much faster on the treadmill, but it does not necessarily help with reading a lot. So, yeah, propaganda and bad religion are to blame for my lack of reading, which I guess is a good thing, or maybe not. We will see. Which brings me to the question, what am I planning to read this week? Do I have plans? Well, I already said I'm going to finish Gotham and possibly start Greater Gotham. That's something I just want to do for all kinds of reasons. Beyond that, I plan, or I know I will be reading or rereading stuff around Mormonism, because, you know, of the video, and that means having to go back to stuff and double-check things and so forth. So I'll probably spend time in those Mormonism books, that mostly being probably American Zion by Benjamin Park, and Kingdom of Nauvoo by Benjamin Park, and probably the Brigham Young biography by John Turner and some others. There's a collection of essays edited by Kathleen Flake and someone else whose name escapes me right now, that is about different religions in and the market in America, and I'm looking forward to checking some of the essays in that one out. So that is something that will happen. When it comes to fiction, I still kind of struggle with having like a fiction book I really, really, really feel strongly about reading. I hope this will change. Maybe something will come up in April where I'm like, fuck yeah, I need to read this. If you have recommendations, let me know. There is, obviously, there are books that I'm vaguely interested in. There is, of course, the Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones that has been out for like 2 weeks now. I do want to read that one, I think. There is that long-awaited collection of all the Jane Austen novels and all the Bronte sister novels in one massive audiobook that I've pre-ordered like for 3 months. It came out today, finally. So technically I could read or listen to a ton of Edwardian novels right now. I just don't know if or when I will feel, you know, really motivated to do so. It's going to happen, of course, but as I said, like, I'm in this weird place right now where fiction kind of doesn't really kick me that much. I hope that'll change again, but for now I'm reading a lot of like academic stuff and non-fiction stuff. We'll see how well that goes throughout this week. Which brings me to the next part, which is, of course, what did I do last week? Well, I did not finish the Mormonism video, as you may have noticed, because it's not yet up. I just like couldn't really focus on it. All kinds of other stuff just going on and finding it hard to focus on the Mormonism video. I am more confident in it for this week, though, so I'll go there in a moment. I did, however, make a video on the whole anti-intellectualism in the booktube sphere, or the book sphere in general video, because there's, something that's been pissing me off for a long time, and I felt like I wanted to say a couple of words about why I think the way that booktubers in particular are talking about this, which is usually just like dunking on Book Talk, I think is not actually helping the discussion, because it is at its core a political discussion, and you need to be explicitly political if you want to talk about this in a meaningful way. And as long as we're not doing that, we should just like shut up and not just dunk on Book Talk, because it kind of sucks, makes you a bit of a dick, and I don't think that's a good approach. So that video I did make. I tried it a couple of times, and it came out, and it was surprisingly successful between yesterday when I put it up and this morning. It has like 400 something views, which is way above anything I was expecting. So thanks for that, everybody. Thanks for the comments. There's interesting stuff going on there, and yeah, it happened. I worked longer on it than I thought I would, because I recorded in like 2 parts. I had this, dumb idea of recording the first, like the intro, with my beret and a glass of wine and wearing a turtleneck and not, the usual stuff that I usually wear and so forth, because it's, about intellectualism and anti-intellectualism and so forth, and then switch into something less performatively elitist in the middle. And I did that, and then I tried to figure out how to do that in a more satisfying way, which is, how to actually use a proper transition and not just have like a jump cut between both parts. And doing that took a while, and we'll get there in a moment, but I figured it out. I'm glad it worked. I feel better about it now. So that's something I did video-wise. And then we had our usual monthly live stream on Saturday with Lily from Lily's Little Library as a guest. I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too. If you haven't, check out the replay, and if you haven't checked out Lily's channel yet, go check out Lily's channel. I had a lot of fun. I hope Lily had a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed it. There will be one in April at some point. I need to figure out which time there will be one in April, because I think the last weekend of April I'll be at Keep It True Festival, so probably the weekend before, but that might be Easter. April's going to be messy, is what I'm saying. So that's what I did last week. Let's talk about this week for a moment, and the plans for this week, and then we'll see where the rambling is taking us. I will work on the Mormonism video. I feel very confident about it today. I hope this will keep for the rest of the week. I've made my peace with, not having a deadline or anything of the sorts, but I will work on the Mormonism video throughout the week. There will be one other video for sure, which is, of course, the Spring into Adventure tag, because Liam from Liam's Lyceum did, in fact, tag me on that one. And, yeah, I'm going to do that. I just need to come up with answers, and then I can record that relatively quickly. And it doesn't require me reading a book or doing a lot of, research or anything else, which would, prevent me or be harder to do while I'm doing or working the Mormonism video. So I think that's the one that I'm going to go for, maybe on Wednesday, maybe on Thursday. So there is a video out. That will be that tag. And if I come up with something else in addition to that, then that video will also happen hopefully this week. But in the background, I will try to work on the Mormonism video, at least part by part by part, if I manage to do the introduction, because I kind of have to redo the intro this time around. And the first part on Joseph Smith and the early years of Mormonism this week, and possibly the one on Mormon scripture. That would be like a really good start. That is, I think, the biggest sort of block if I've worked through that, then there will be, parts on Brigham Young and the trip west to Utah, and then there will be one on the sort of like reintegration into American society. Possibly then after that, I guess, one on the long and torturous march to the political right that Mormonism did throughout the late 30s and all the way to, obviously the 80s and 90s, and then I need to figure out how to sort of like break that apart into where the LDS Church and Mormonism is these days. That's going to be happening. I'll see how far I go, and I want to stop fretting too much about it, and that's certainly something I've been struggling with. Right? I'm not exactly a very confident person in general, so these kind of things I often try too hard, and then I struggle with words or whatever, and getting in like a more confident, more relaxed sort of frame of mind while recording it and not pressuring myself too much is sort of the key here. And at least today I feel like I can pull that off at least for a couple of days this week, so that might be something here. And that's the goal. Make at least one video on the tag and work on the Mormonism video. Possibly make other videos if I have brilliant ideas, and we'll see how far that will take us. And I think, in a way, having that video that I made yesterday, well, I did not make it yesterday, I recorded it on Thursday. Thursday, I think, and then it took me like 3 or 4 days to figure out how to do the transition thing. That did, however, help in a lot of ways, right? Because it is doing a bit something like having a costume change, so to speak, using an actual transition, which is an editing tool that I know it doesn't sound like much because it really isn't objectively, but it is kind of difficult to do that kind of editing if you're blind like me, right? To explain, right? I use FFmpeg as an editing tool, which is a editing software, which is a command line tool. Like, I literally type stuff in, which means if I have to cut something or edit something, I need to listen to the video and by ear figure out where the cut should be, and then put in like the seconds and so forth. Like, obviously, 10th of seconds is roughly, put that in to these into the command line to edit stuff, which is interesting when you try to do something like use a transition, right? Like cutting stuff off, fairly easy. Concatenating different videos to like one large video, pretty easy. Beyond that, however, stuff gets very interesting, and there are ways of doing that that I wanted to do. In this case, using a transition. There's different transition filters you can use to have like one image sort of like dissolve in the next. It's fancy, or not really fancy in this regard, but like, you know what I mean when I talk about video transitioning, right? The thing is, however, if you do that, in my case, you need to find out how to do that in FFmpeg, which means you have to go to Stack Exchange or other places where people who use this kind of tool talk about actual source code and shit like that, and you have to figure out a form of code that does actually do the thing you want to do, and then you have to edit it, and then you figure out how. And if you do that, you also need to crossfade one audio track into the next one, and you need to figure out how to do that, and then you do the whole thing, and then you realize that you've set the cut too close, and suddenly the ending of you talking me talking in the first part kind of fades out while I'm still talking, and then you need to edit the whole thing and redo the whole thing, and then obviously every single time it has to render the whole thing, which takes a couple of hours, and then you upload the video to ask someone else for their opinion, whether it now looks better or worse, and that is a long fucking process. And that's why I usually don't edit my videos very much, now you know. However, if I want to do something like a long video, say the Mormonism video, right? Having a proper transition between the individual parts, because I'll have to record these in parts, right? Having something to do that is probably a good thing, right? Because while most of this is me just like talking to you in front of a screen, in front of a camera, right? Having some small like visual clues or visual help or anything interesting there might be, a good idea. Having that costume change felt like a fun little gimmick to make the video more interesting than just me sitting here under my bed, right? So that is something that I think gives me sort of like another tool in the toolbox to make the video better or more interesting, and I think helps with that confidence, right? because video editing is one way to boost your confidence, because you can ideally polish up the product by making it more interesting, all of these kind of things, look more professional, slightly less terrible, whatever you want to call it, right? It's another tool and now that I've figured that out, and I know I've used it in the past, but it took me like 3 or 4 days this time around to figure it out again. Now I know. Now I can use that for the next video as well in some way or form. And that, I think, is a good thing in the larger sort of like scheme of things. Now, obviously, if I could really, really well edit and whatnot, there would be all kinds of things I would want to do with videos, especially with larger videos, like go full on like a video essay on that, have fancy graphics in it, have like images that help explain what I'm talking about, all of that stuff in it. But that's far beyond my skills because, once again, even though I can figure out how to do that in theory, every time I do it, I have to send it to someone else who then has to give me their opinion. And if they, then I have to figure out what they mean with their opinion. And it's a long-ass trial and error process is what it is. So while I have all these dreams, for now, I guess I'll just go with having proper transition effects between chapters of a video. And we'll see where that takes us. And that is sort of like why I think doing that video on anti-intellectualism in that regard, like on a technical level, does actually help with the Mormonism video as well, because it does give me a small boost of confidence when it comes to talking about this. The other part is, of course, once again, the realization that having a video that is not about a specific book does much better than any video I do about like individual books, which is, a general booktube thing. We all know that doing tier list shop or anything more general does better than individual reviews. Everyone has been talking about that forever, and there's lots of reasons why that is the case. It is kind of interesting to see that so starkly. The other thing that I found interesting is and this is something I'm struggling with, right? Of course, like all my videos are just basically improvised, and I kind of think about what I want to do. I usually write down like almost like bullet points, like this is the stuff I want to have in that video, and then I push around those individual sort of points until they're in roughly the order that I want to have them in. Then I read through that order, try to remember it, start recording, and hopefully don't forget half of what I wanted to say while I'm recording. And afterwards, I look at it and say, okay, I guess I missed no vital points, we're good. So it's not as polished as someone who reads an actual script. But it also means that like I do think about like what I put into a video or not. And with that video from yesterday, what I wanted to do was explain that point about that we need to be honest about something being political in a space that has always tried to appear non-political. And that was sort of like my larger point, which is why I kind of refrained from giving a long history of anti-intellectualism and so forth. And what I thought, because I thought that would distract, would kind of detract from the point that I was trying to make. Interestingly enough, most of the comments are then about the history of anti-intellectualism, and there's something to be said about that. Like, obviously, yeah, that was a choice I made, and it was interesting that clearly I was right in making that choice, because everyone is still focusing on the history of anti-intellectualism, right? And if I would have gotten more in the weeds there, that would probably have led to even more people commenting about what I got wrong in one specific point or whatever. And I don't know what to do about that. It's just interesting because it means that something that I've mentioned before is that, like, while I think I know what I'm saying, as soon as I record that and it's mediated through the camera, through the screen to you watching the video, listening to the video, right? What happens is, now what arrives in your brain is not what started in my brain. I mean, obviously that's basic communication and miscommunication theory. We all know that at our core, but it kind of is important to understand that in a way when it comes to how I frame my points in videos and where I need to be clearer with what I want to say versus where I can go deeper. It also obviously, and this is your engagement prompt, right? I could make a longer video on just more like the history of anti-intellectualism, because that's not what that video yesterday was supposed to be. But as I said in that video I mentioned, I did read Richard Hofstadter's Anti-Intellectualism in American Life twice, and I've read other stuff on sort of like the larger subject, so I could make a video where I talk a bit more about anti-intellectualism. I could obviously also talk about anti-intellectualism on the left, which clearly is something that we don't need to think about too much right now, because right now in, say, America and Western Europe and so forth, attacks on intellectualism and education are coming from the right, and anything else is bullshit, and we all need to understand that. But that doesn't mean that, just say, Stalin didn't also very much persecute intellectuals and higher education. We don't have to go too deep into that here as well. But that is something that we could talk about, because it's an authoritarian thing. It's not necessarily just a far right thing. Right now, most authoritarians that we have to deal with here in Europe and in North America are far-right authoritarians, but that's just like where we are in time right now. But it might be possible to make a video where I talk a bit more about the larger sort of like history and ideas behind what makes people, what is anti-intellectualism, where did it start, what does it do, how is it connected to, say, class struggles up to a point, how is it, there is something there, is what I'm saying. That might be an interesting thing. So, engagement prompt. Do you want that? Let me know in the comments, and maybe I'll do it. Maybe not this week, because this sounds like another rabbit hole where I would probably spend too much time researching stuff. But it's certainly something I could talk about more, because clearly we need to do more. We need to do better in that regard on BookTube and anywhere, right? So that might be something. But once again, that was like an interesting thing, and that brings me once again back to the Mormonism video, because I do very much pressure myself with that whole video. I want to get it right. I want to make my points so that, and that's like the whole idea, right? Like I make a video on Mormonism. So then when I make individual videos about Brandon Sanderson novels, I can always go like, well, as I mentioned in my Mormonism video, this is where this idea comes from. So I need to make sure that these points that I want to have in the Mormonism video need to be as clear as possible, so they actually come through and don't end up in like discussing individual small details on how many times Joseph Smith did in fact end up in front of a court. I think it's 2 or 3 times, but versus my point is a very different one. So I need to make sure and probably work more on that and be better at hammering the important points home. And I don't necessarily know how to do that, because I think it's very difficult to actually sort of know that in advance without just like doing it and just gathering experience. So that's something I'm hopefully will get good at with the Mormonism video. My plan is, of course, once again to record parts and then hand them off to some people that maybe know more about it or come from a very different perspective, so to get their feedback, and maybe re-record parts if there is, criticism, if I misspeak on something, because, there's like sensitive topics in there because we're talking religion, right? So that's something that I'm planning to do. Because all of this is, of course, a learning process. Anyway, I've been rambling for far too long, so let's cut this. Once again, thanks everyone for the support. Thanks everyone for watching. I really, really appreciate all of that. I'll talk to you about the Spring into Adventure tag in a couple of days. I'll talk to you about other stuff whenever I come up with it, and hopefully the Mormons will finally, leave me be. I'll get this Mormon-shaped albatross off my neck in the next couple of weeks, and you'll hear more about that, obviously, next Monday. So yeah, until then, thanks and cheers.